It was a warm, sunny afternoon. I sat at the seashore feeling the cool sand under my toes. The sky was clear and the waves gently rolled in and out. I had been coming to this beach for years. It was my place to relax, to think. The sound of the ocean always made me feel calm. I loved watching the waves, how they moved so smoothly back and forth like breathing. That day felt just like any other. I was lost in my thoughts, staring out at the water. I didn't notice the wave at first. It seemed like a normal wave, nothing special. But then, it started to get bigger. The water swelled higher and higher, and I stood up, confused. I had never seen a wave like this before. Before I could react, the wave crashed over me. The force knocked me off my feet. I felt the water pulling me under, strong and unrelenting. I kicked and struggled, trying to swim back to the surface, but the current held me down. Panic set in. I couldn't breathe, couldn't see anything but the swirling water around me. My chest burned, my head spun, and I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper, the cold water closing in. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, everything went quiet. The rushing sound of the water stopped. It was like I had fallen into a still pool. I opened my eyes, expecting to be underwater, but I wasn't. I was standing on solid ground. My head was spinning and my legs felt weak, like I had just been dragged out of the ocean. I looked around, blinking hard, trying to understand what I was seeing. I wasn't on my beach anymore. The sand beneath my feet was different, darker, almost silver. The air smelled strange too, heavy and sweet, like flowers I didn't recognize. The sky above me wasn't blue. It was a deep, glowing purple, with streaks of gold that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. I looked out at the waves. They were still there, but they moved in slow motion, each ripple stretching and pulling like the water was thick and syrupy. I stood there frozen. Where was I? Was this a dream? It felt too real to be a dream. My skin tingled with cold and my heart was racing, but everything around me was strangely calm. I started walking, hoping to find something, or someone, that could tell me where I was. The beach seemed to go on forever. I looked behind me, but the wave that had pulled me under was gone, as if it had never been there. After walking for what felt like hours, I saw something in the distance. It looked like a small town, but it wasn't like any town I had ever seen. The buildings were tall but twisted, their shapes curving in unnatural ways. They glowed faintly, like they were alive, their surfaces shifting and breathing with a soft hum. Some buildings floated just above the ground, while others were half buried in the sand, tilting to one side as if they had sunk into the earth. I walked closer, my legs shaky and my head still spinning. As I approached, I saw people, at least they looked like people. Their skin shimmered like light bouncing off water, and their eyes glowed faintly. They moved slowly, as if in a trance, gliding through the streets without noticing me at all. I tried to speak to one of them, a woman sitting by the shore, her legs crossed and her face expressionless. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "Can you help me?" She didn't respond. She just stared out at the ocean, her glowing eyes empty, her face as still as stone. I backed away, a chill running down my spine. Something was deeply wrong here. I could feel it. The town felt empty, even though there were people everywhere. It was as if they were ghosts, moving through their lives without seeing or feeling anything. I walked further into the town and saw more strange things. Cars floated a few feet above the ground, moving backwards in a slow, steady line, their wheels not even touching the road. The trees were growing upside down, their roots dangling in the air while their leaves brushed the ground. Everything looked familiar, but it was twisted, like I was seeing the world through a warped mirror. I entered what looked like a market. People were buying food, but the food wasn't sitting on tables or shelves. It was floating in bubbles above their heads. They reached up, grabbed the bubbles, and ate the food as if it were completely normal. No one noticed how strange everything was. They smiled and went about their business as if nothing was wrong. I tried again to talk to someone. A man standing at a fruit stall. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice shaky, desperate for an answer. But he just looked at me with his glowing eyes and smiled. He didn't speak. Instead, he handed me a small glowing fruit. It was bright blue and it hummed softly in my hand, sending a strange warmth up my arm. I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't hungry, but it felt like I had to take it. I shoved it in my pocket, feeling my chest tighten with each step. I started running, my heart pounding, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The town seemed to stretch on endlessly. The streets twisted, curving into impossible directions, leading me further and further away from the beach. I turned a corner and saw a park, but the swings hung limp, unmoving, even though there was a strong breeze. A man was pushing a child in a stroller, but the stroller wasn't moving. It stayed in place, frozen. Yet the man kept pushing, over and over, never noticing. I wanted to scream, to run, to find something that made sense, but the deeper I went, the more the world around me felt wrong. The glow of the buildings cast long, dark shadows that stretched towards me, reaching like fingers trying to pull me in. I felt dizzy, like the air was too thick, too heavy to breathe. My legs felt like they were moving through water, every step slower than the last. I needed to get out. I needed to find the way back, but the beach felt further and further away. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a sound, familiar, comforting. The ocean. I ran towards it, following the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. When I finally reached the edge of the town, I saw the beach. But something was wrong. The sand wasn't shifting. The waves were frozen mid-crash, hanging in the air like a paused video. I took a few shaky steps closer, my breath catching in my throat. That's when I saw myself. I was sitting there right where I had been before the wave took me. My body was still, my face blank, staring out at the unmoving sea. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the image didn't change. There I was, sitting on the sand, as if nothing had ever happened. I moved closer, my legs trembling. Was I dreaming? Was I dead? My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out a hand towards myself. Just as my fingers were about to touch my own shoulder, the me sitting on the beach turned her head slowly, staring directly at me. Her eyes were empty, hollow, but she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, eerie, like she knew something I didn't. Suddenly she stood up, brushing the sand off her legs as if preparing to leave. She looked at me one last time, her eyes narrowing. Without a word, she walked away, calmly, into the distance. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. I wanted to chase her, to scream, to ask her what was happening, but I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy, stuck, like they had become part of the sand. I was trapped, rooted in place, unable to leave. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something else. People from the town were coming towards me, but they weren't walking. They were floating, their feet hovering just above the ground. Their movements slow and smooth, their glowing eyes were fixed on me, unblinking as they circled around me, closing in. My heart raced, but I couldn't move. One of them, a woman with long silver hair, stepped forward. She didn't speak, but she held out her hand. In it was the same glowing fruit I had been given earlier. She smiled, cold and knowing, just like the other me had smiled. "Take it," her voice whispered, though her lips never moved. I shook my head, backing away, but there was nowhere to go. The people closed in around me, their eyes all fixed on me, waiting. The fruit pulsed softly in the woman's hand, and for a moment I felt drawn to it, like I had no choice but to take it. But then I remembered the me I had seen sitting on the beach, the way she had smiled and walked away, like she had taken something that was mine. I didn't know if I was still in the real world or if this was some strange nightmare. I didn't know if I could ever go back. My hand hovered over the glowing fruit, trembling, and I asked myself, if I take it, will I ever find my way home? Or am I already too late?